we've got something a little bit different for you today. This is another bust, and it's from the Frozen Ninja 3D Kickstarter campaign. So you can see this guy's the Alchemist, and we've got lots of jars here, different compounds, whatever. So with this we can play around with maybe some metals, see what we want to do with this vest. Who knows, maybe put some kind of a straight pattern on it. We got his bow tie here. We might make the eye glowing, and we seem to have a either a sewn together head or some kind of a helmet type thing here. So we'll see what we want to do with that. He's looking pretty mischievous. Maybe we'll make some of this stuff glowing here. And we'll go over the materials that we've got for that. So this might be fun for getting some of the glows. The green fluorescent paint that we used in the other Frozen Ninja video. Now we've got some of these fun secret weapon paints. They're in the Verdigris series. So we got Verdigris pale green, Verdigris blue, and then the dark green. I use these for skin tones, for grays, all kinds of fun stuff. And of course the usual liner paints, brown, green, red, blue liner, all from Reaper. The green and red make a very nifty grayish brown, while say the blue and brown will make a nifty black. We've also got some of the clear paints out here. And this is something, I'll show you a little more how the green and purple together make an interesting gray and how you can manipulate that. We've got a couple other clears here. This is one of the new ones that's underway, the prototype orange. Got clear yellow. So those should be good for some of the containers, right? And as usual, we have our craft brushes. These are the number 8 rounds. And again, when they're new and pristine, a nice tip. But once they've been used and worn out a little bit, you can see you've got this really nifty, right here, kind of a chisel type of a shape. We may use some of our sponges here, the makeup sponges. You've seen these an awful lot. And just a quick little show you the brushes here. And this is where they come from. These are from Hobby Lobby. You can see they're $5 for 12. You can get these online, no problem. And again, they're nifty because they can take the brunt of the work and leave your, say, your Winsor Newton Series 7s for some of the more delicate stuff. So what we're going to do next is put some colors out on the palette, and we'll do that shaded base coat phase, which will involve some glazing, who knows, maybe even some wet blending. But all it is just to establish where the lights and darks are going to be right away. So we've got ourselves a bunch of liner paints out on the palette, and we're going to give this shaded base coat thing a little run through here. So blue liner here, brown liner, red liner, green liner, sepia liner. And the idea is just go over this, get some darks in there, and we'll actually remove a lot of what we're going to throw on there, but I just want to get the darks on there and just play off of that, see what I have, because actually sometimes reveals a little bit of shape for you. So the nice thing about the liner paints, you can see I'm throwing some water out here on the palette. So you got your blue liner. See if we take the brown, that's going to make us a nice, almost like a black right there. See if we can take the red and the green. That's going to give us a little bit of a different tone to work with. And of course, we have our sepia liner. What I'm going to do is, so I still have to determine what that might be. That, I actually say that's more of a some kind of piece of leather or whatever stitched together over his head. Maybe. We'll see. And you can see there was some sepia liner there. Now this is a little bit of the blue and the green. And I'm just working this almost like a watercolor painting from top down. Not worried about what's there. The whole idea, just get that surface covered. Sometimes you can even just take the straight up liner paint on there, and I just grab some water. Here, let's throw a little more sepia liner here. You can see what I'm talking about. So I just threw the paint on there. Now I'm going to take the water and thin it down. Oh, it's actually on the figure. And the point of this is, because this is kind of a steampunk type thing, I just want to have some color variations in the darks. So you can see some parts of this almost look a little more bluish. Some parts almost a little more tan, but I have to work pretty rapidly here, because what I want to be able to do is this. So see how the sponge takes some of that away, and it starts to reveal some of the shape underneath. That was primed with the usual Badger Steino Res. I'm going to leave that black mostly intact, or dark color there. And I can always have another sponge handy. This is a pretty vigorous process, as you can see. So we're just going to take away some of this. Work our way down. Maybe here on the face, take away a little bit more. You can also cut the sponges to shape if you need to. Now, sorry that keeps hitting the palette camera. That's, like I told you on the other bust, this camera setup is not for obviously large objects like this. And so I've been doing the Patreon thing so that I can try and get funds to basically create a whole new setup with different cameras, different lighting rigs, so that I can create a little more separation between the cameras and the thing that I'm painting. And let's continue. So I'll show you what I mean about just cutting these up here. So we take this. See, now we got a clean sponge we can work with. And don't want to remove everything that I put on there, but you can see now compared to this, there's a little more. See, we've got some brown tints in there. It just gave it a little more flavor. So we're going to do the same thing over here on this side. Now this is more of just the blue liner here, since I'm thinking of this as more of a grayish metal type area. You can see that I'm trying to work with gravity. Now maybe turn up the brightness a bit here for you, because these are definitely going to be some substantial darks. You can see that I try and use some natural stopping places here, almost like little wells or dams. Grab a little bit of that red liner. Again, this is not supposed to be your final colors or anything like that. In some ways, I'm just familiarizing myself with what I've got here. I haven't really seen this before, and just like the summoning a dragon witch bust, I didn't want to study it a whole bunch and come out with some clear plan. I was trying to actually leave it a little more speculative for you. You can see just like I did with the other one. I changed colors. I'm back to the blue here. This is all going to be in super shadow, so I'm just going to go even darker here. It's all going to be pressed up against his back. No sense in getting too crazy about what's there. Working this down to the bottom here. Just getting things covered. You can even use your finger if you want. You can see my fingers have plenty of paint all over them already. And again, this is not a dainty method, not for the faint of heart, I suppose. But what it does, and the folks that have started to adopt some of the principles of this shaded base coat, they say it's very kind of liberating in a way, because now they're not worried so much about staying within the lines. It frees up their brush. You can see how this is just kind of at the ends of my fingers here. They're not doing little things like this. They're just attacking the miniatures. And it's not like you don't have to, you can't spend hours and hours painting something and making it very refined. It's just a matter of how much time you want to spend. This is not about that end phase, this is about the beginning phase, and if you can set up all of that nice, delicate work early on in a more rapid fashion, well, guess what? You have more time to spend on those fun details, the glowing stuff, weathering, different chemicals in the jars and containers. And here we'll do a little bit more here. Take away some of this. But now it's definitely got some nice deep darks established in the recesses. That's what's nifty about both the liner and the clear paints. You can kind of water the heck out of them, but they maintain their consistency. Now I've got all of those liner paints out there. We can do a few little things here. So let's say we want that vest to be more of a reddish brown, whatever. Let's take some of that sepia liner, some of the red liner, and now we'll go a little more opaque. Still working with the big old craft brushes. You know, if we wanted this to be one of those, almost a red, I don't want to say red velvet, but that whatever kind of a red silk fabric that some of the vests were made out of at that time. So I know this is just going to seem dark to you, but there's actually all kinds of neat reds and tans. See, we'll take some of the sepia liner, and now we'll just work on this side. So now it's a little bit more of a brown. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then back to some of the red. And I guess I have to think also, okay, if those thing on his back is going to be more of a metalish type thing and have more, say, bluish, purplish, greenish grays on it, well, I want maybe more of a warm color here to show up against that, contrast with it. And we just keep working around here. Looks like there's a little chunk of that vest right here. I think the bow tie might give a little bit more of a brown liner look to it. Like so. There's that. There's my red liner. So all we're trying to do is just establish the color scheme, the lights and darks. What is it that we're looking for? So this again, I have to determine, is that more of, say, a leather helmet type thing? So I'm going to go with even more sepia liner here. But now I watered it down. And see, it's kind of going down into the crevices. Got some of my other makeup sponges here, like this. So you can see, even though this is really additional glazing, it'll be what you'll see more in the next phase. We're just trying to work our way around this, so it's not linger too long on that part. I'm going to grab some of the blue liner, a bit of the brown. And I'm just going to see, we got this, we want this to be a darker, almost, I don't know, an iron color, whatever. It is just the base slash plinth. So, once again, not looking to have a whole bunch of attention paid to that. I'm going to darken it down even more. I can still go in there and wipe away. And there's this underside part that, well, you can't really see. But we'll just hit it anyway. Better do it now when it's easy to get at. So like when things like that happen, where I just had the brush kind of go wonky and hit that. So there are no arms attached to this, just in case you're wondering. And what I'll do is, right here in this area, just remove some of it, but not all of it, because we can go with some rust in that area. Again, you can cut those. See, now there's a little more turn right here, and all I did was just take some of that away. Same thing here. See how that just gets a little bit darker. And let's take some of this. So I don't know, maybe the goggles should be more of a coppery type color. So we'll leave that go. I am going to do the rest of this here. Take some away. And let's see what we want to do on this. I'm just going to make some sections of this even darker. Again, because this is going right up against his back. So we'll just do that. Kind of a smokestacky type thing there. Let's get a little more of the deep darks in here. Now this is a little bit different than, say, this was the shaded base coat phase on something that had been primed gray or white. Well, we would have been doing a little different approach on that. But here, since I did that priming, had a little bit of light to dark on it, I could just get in here with some glazes. Now that we have that established, let's say we take a few things there. So I got this verdigris pale green, that's from Secret Weapon. Let's throw that out there. And this is another off-white that I use all the time. It's Maiden Flash. That's from Reaper. Just throw these out here on the palette. And this is the nifty thing, once again, about the liner paint. So let's say we take some of the brown liner paint, mix it with the green. See, we lighten that up. I'm going to say those are maybe more of a copper type thing, so let's not do that. Let's do parts that we think might be steel color here. So let's do a little Maiden Flash. That kind of lightens that up a bit. So the liner paints, they were used as a glazing color, and now we're getting in and just starting to paint with these almost in a lighter fashion. I'm going to say that's maybe just a regular metal too. And this is why I like the craft brushes, because they're just bigger. I can cover the surface more quickly. And I'm not worried about super smooth blends, because we're going to go over that with weathering too. We want probably some smoke on that. You can see we can even potentially do a little wet and a wet in some places. But with that dark established, see, I'm going to go in here. There's already some shading in there. Yep, maybe this is some kind of reddish glow over here. We'll see. We'll try different things. And this, I don't have 5 or 6 hours on this. I only have a few. So the pace is gonna be quick. So that's just a little more of the Maiden Flash, and if every so often it picks up some of the color that's there, that's not a big deal. And because I have all the liner paints just sitting out here on the palette, I can always just grab some whenever I need it. Looks like that's a book there. I just noticed that. See, every so often I end up picking up some paint that was not completely dry. And this is the nifty thing, even though this is really just a base coat, see how I kind of did a little bit of wet and wet blending on that. Let's change this up a bit. Let's grab a little bit of sepia liner, make this almost a little more brownish. These containers, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with those yet. Again, I have a little more time constraints here as far as what I can do and still show you everything. I really don't want to do the voiceover speed ramped thing. That's just not, I don't like to do those kind of videos. So here, what we can even do is, okay, let's take the green liner paint, mix it with the Maiden Flash, and now we have a metal that's almost got kind of a greenish color there. So again, this is still just establishing what's light and what's dark, and I've got some of my previous glazes out there that I can even do. Look at that, it's a little bit of wet and a wet. Let's see, so I've got red liner and the sepia liner, and I want to see what happens if I make this almost kind of coppery with the goal in mind. Looks like these are some kind of dispensers here. Remember those verdigris colors we had? So I want to see if I can maybe use those. I'm going to get out. That's that clear orange that we talked about. Going to do a little more with the maiden flesh here. And again, we'll do more precision later, but at this point, this is more me just figuring out what do I want to do in some of these areas. So I say I may need that to be more reddish. So I'm going to take the orange, mix it with the red liner. Now I've got something that's a little more, or you can start to see the color differential here between this and say the metal that's here. What I can also then do is play with the different, this can be, if it's, say, that verdigris pale green and everywhere else has more of the orange rust. Those two areas will play off of each other a little bit, or those two weathering styles. So you can even throw a little bit of the orange in there right now. So you can see the difference that makes. And again, not worried about staying within lines and all that kind of stuff, because we're just trying to figure out what it is. What are we trying to do here? And at this point, if you find out later, oh gee, that was too light, well, you haven't spent hours and hours carefully shading something. So you say, you know what, I'm just going to knock that down a little bit. I'm just going to throw a little bit of a glaze over the top of that, tone it down. So I think what it also does is just reduces that element of fear. I've seen so many people just be afraid of the things that they're painting, or they're worried about messing it up or whatever. And hopefully, again, like I said, if you incorporate some of this, you don't have to do it exactly like this, but even just the idea of working a little faster, working a little looser. This painting thing is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be all about the anxiety. And this is something that can make things go a little bit faster, a little bit easier for you. Reduce the stress. Yeah, then that's cool. Now there's not a ton of different colors on this. Like I said, we have managed to find a few shapes in here. Let's not linger on that for too long. Here, let's do a little bit of skin tone. So let's get a little bit of that red liner in there. Some of the red liner, some of the orange. Here we go. Don't know what exactly skin tone I want to do. I want it to be just more of a human type skin tone, or to make him look super evil or whatever with lighter colored skin. I think I might go a little bit more almost towards, I don't know if you want to call it a standard human skin tone. Just throw that out there. I can lighten it up a bit. Get this in here. And all we're trying to do is just figure out just how light are we going to go with this. And you can see we're starting to do some, obviously, a little bit of wet and a wet blending here. I don't think I want the skin tone to get too light, because if I want these to be glowing in any way, if the skin area behind it is darker, well, that's a plus. Gives it something to contrast against. And we'll lighten this up a little bit. And let's again only stay on this for so long because context is everything. And I want to see what's happening with these metal straps for his backpack there. So I'm just going to leave that alone. We've got blue liner out in the palette. Going to mix it up with the Maiden Flesh and see how that changes everything. Now watch this. All of a sudden, that dark sets up the application of blue. Kind of gives it a little bit of a grayish metal look, or maybe a steel instead of just iron. Let's do some of that over here. Can even make it a bit lighter here. See, we just sweep down. So I'm using the side of the brush. Sweep down like this. And I'm not worried about precise details at this point. All we're trying to do is figure out just what's going where. Now remember here, we had started on this, so now we'll give that more of a bluish feel. And when the rust hits that, we'll get that bit of contrast. And this is, again, the beauty of the liner paints. Let's throw a little more. What the heck, let's go with. Throw that green out there. Gonna get another little shot of the Maiden Flesh 2. And with our blue liner, not wiping out everything that I did with those earlier glazes. Not all of it. Gonna leave some of that behind. So I'm gonna go with one more. Touch of that Maiden Flesh. See how that lightens that up, but still keeps it somewhat bluish. Just gonna go over these bolts right here. But who knows, maybe I'm gonna mix a little green in with that. And this is again all about context, because right now it looks light. But look at how dark that is on the palette. You can see how dark that is. But again, when we get over here, boy, that looks like almost like a highlight. So that's why I don't usually recommend doing the whole black primer thing. If that's what you're comfortable with, that's fine. But I would suggest maybe covering that up as soon as possible, because again, context is everything. What you view it against or compare it against, that's going to have a major influence on how you're going to approach maybe the area next to it. And up here, and I don't have to worry about the shirt or whatever, because again, not having tons of time invested in that. That part is good. Here, let's grab a little green in here. Again, changing that color around. Already starting to think about some reflected light here. And just going to brush over these guys. And feel free to use your hands to blend things if you want. I do that all the time. And I can just drop the paint in here, push it around. Again, because everything is very free and loose, I feel like I can do that, not mess anything up. Now, let's see, we got that maiden flesh here. Let's do a maiden flesh and a touch of that green. And I'm just going to see what I want to do with this shirt here. We know we probably want this to be lighter. And this may not have this greenish touch to it eventually, but for now, see, I'll just go after that with my finger. Do the other shoulder here. We may even use that just as kind of an underpainting. I guess that we'll do this as his collar, make it lighter. And I'll just throw a little bit more of the maiden flesh out here. Actually, looks like some yellow just got on the palette. And I'm just gonna use that. So here, I think I want that to be more of a lens. And maybe this will be the glowing thing left. So two different things there. Let's see what happens. This. Got to figure out what I want to do with this strap here. That may be more of a reddish brown by the time we're done. But for now, just gonna throw a few little lights here, tap on that. Shake the camera a bit. So I'm gonna find some of my red liner again, if I can, and maybe we'll mix that with something a little lighter on the vest here real quick. There's a little bit of that maiden flesh. Get some of the sepia liner with it. You know, I thought of for the vest was just those little thin kind of lines that go down. Keep it simple, because there's gonna be a lot of stuff going on with this backpack and everything else. So I'm even gonna put a little bit of that up here. So there you have just a quick establishing of lights and darks with the shaded base coat, and this gives us something that we can work off of now. And we'll get more into those mid-tone areas. I've thrown out a few more colors here. Got a couple of secret weapon colors. Now they're called weathering paints, but we use them for everything. Certainly not just for weathering. And we've got engine rust and old rust. It's gonna help us with a few different things. Maybe some skin tones. Maybe even working in our copper section here. So let's try some of this here. Mixed a little bit of yellow in with that. Yeah, I wanted this for maybe making this leather strap a little less yellow and maybe a little more towards the red. Yeah, just to vary that a little bit. And even maybe here on this surface, maybe even a little bit on the vest, just to lighten that up in some areas. Like here, and here. Let's get a little bit of that over here too. Still working with the larger craft brushes, but now this is one that's got fresher tip on it. It's not quite as beat up as the ones that we used in that shaded base coat phase. So you can see this gives it a hint of redness there. The nifty thing about these, they are really designed to be super flat, which everybody likes. And they're almost a little on the semi-translucent side, which means that some of what we've got here is gonna show through, which is why this is just, it's having a little bit more of a, I guess, a burgundy hue maybe. So it's not a warm red. And we're gonna get a little bit of this around this strap here. Kind of blend a little bit with my finger. So that's nice. Now it's gonna do some things on the face here. Again, don't be shy about just wiping paint away. Can always do much more refinement later on. I always have to keep in mind I don't want to screw around too much in this area because, well, it's just going to be covered up anyways. So we'll let that go for now, and I'm going to grab some of that, that's the clear orange. I'm going to go with that, mixed with that old rust color. Yeah, that is what we wanted. That's what I was looking for. So, yes, I realize this is upside down, but I kind of needed it to be. Because it's easier for me if I was left-handed to be working the other way, but I am right-handed. And you'll see that kind of leaving these areas by some of these, where that strap is and such, leaving those open. Good reason for that, because pretty much is that's the area where the verdigris is going to go. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to get in depth and paint a bunch of things there, only to find that, oh yeah, well, we wiped that out. Just like here, so in some of these darker areas, I'm already starting to throw a little bit of some kind of rust down in there. Just a little something. Because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time again on something that may end up just being covered up anyways. And it's just real quick, not Not anything really elaborate. This is going to be more just straight up old rust here. Down into some of these crevices. I just wipe it away. Same thing over here. Like so. What the heck, we'll throw a little bit on this area too. Again, wipe some parts away. And let's get back to some orange there. Sometimes the so-called weathering, maybe that's something you do at the very final stage. It tends to be, but I don't know, sometimes rules can't always be just 100% this, 100% that. Sometimes the situation on the miniature is a little different, calls for a different approach. And this stuff is almost designed to, here's I throw a little water in there. It's almost designed to just glaze its way down into there. See how it just glazed into the crevices like that? Same thing over here. Yeah, let's get a, you can see just how fine the point is on that brush there. So now we're starting to, I don't know, age this a bit. Maybe get a little more steampunky, a little less clean. Because who knows what these different liquids are and how corrosive they may be. I'm assuming that there's quite a bit of very corrosive things. And we'll just go like that. Now let's, the other rust color that I'm throwing in there, that much lighter rust, that will make a handy skin color once we get back into the face there. Who knows, maybe we make the rims of his goggles there more of a brass-like color, more gold. Let's see as we mess around with those a little more. Actually, I'm going to just throw some of this on these corks here. They're probably going to be more of a tan color, but I just don't want them to be all dark the way they are right now. There will be some things that you just have a hard time to see, because there are just times where I've got to hold the miniature a certain way. So let's set that aside. Let's start to play around with some skin colors here. So I'm going to use that as kind of a skin tone. So that makes that a little bit more of a lively skin tone right there. I don't want to go too much with that. We're also going to get some greens. The proverbial 5 o'clock shadow, and there's so much gray that he's wearing around him that would also affect the skin tone a bit. So let's get a little more maiden flesh mixed up with that. And now we start to lighten up some of these skin tones, add a little more dimension to it. See what we've got here over his, on his upper lips area there. So that dark that I threw into the mouth starts to work well. Now let's take, so we got some of that blue liner, some of that verdigris pale green. And we're starting to put a little bit of green onto the skin colors now. And I'm going to see, let's do this so you can see the colors a little bit better. Sorry to mash the camera. Like I said before, this is some tight working areas here. There's not a whole ton of extra space. That is why I'm, again, trying to gather the funds together to make a larger filming area for things like this. So I'm trying to get some reflected light here on the face. It's reflected light, but it still has some of that grayishness. I'm going to throw some of that on the shirt here, on his collar, because it needs to be lighter anyways. I think you can see we're starting to get some nice variations on his face. Now that chin is it's a little bit unusual chin. It sticks out a little more. So I'm going to do is actually grab myself some clear red here. Again, it's the same series of clears. I think I'm going to try and throw a little bit of red in a few parts here. Let's try that here on the nose. They tend to have some reddishness on the nose. And they don't actually have to be somebody who drinks a lot to have that. I'm going to try and get a little bit of reddishness on the cheekbone there, so it's not all just that greenish gray. Let's see if we can't get a few more lights on this ear here. I think, yeah, that's about where you can see it. I may turn down the brightness a bit, because I had it turned up when everything was those initial glazes and things were pretty dark. So now it's a little bit of that maiden flesh mixed with the red. And get the other ear working here. See it adding some lights to the top, not so much down here. I really do want that to stay in shadow, and even here under those goggles, I sort of have to keep that in shadow too, because the goggles would be casting some kind of a darkness there. I guess I also have to think about what his expression is, and think about enhancing some of those shapes. So I do like the fact that I've got that little bit of a difference between the kind of rosiness of the cheek and then the coolness of his jawline. And while we're here, maybe I'm gonna pull out some of these threads real quick. I don't want to get too hung up on these, but it's more to remind me they're there, for one thing, but also it's about context. If I see, okay, that's what's getting to be a light color, then I know how much room I've got to maneuver with subsequent layers. Now, let's go back with some of that clear yellow. Let's see what we want to do on those goggles there. You can see how I just don't let myself get bogged down into one spot, constantly moving around, because you'll see what a difference this is also going to make. We didn't have any of this before. This wasn't part of the mix here. These highlights on these goggles, they were just they weren't even really visible at all. So now they're going to be much more visible. And also another thing to keep in mind is there's no white in here. This is just the clear yellow. I'm going to throw a little bit of maiden flesh in there. And what that will do is give it a touch more opacity. See, that's going to cover a little more. I'm going to go maiden flesh in here into that. I think it is orange rust? Engine rust, that's what it's called. There is an orange rust secret weapon color, so. And that one I've used many more times. Actually, I think I've got that out here for some of our rust later on. So I'm going to brighten up some of this right here, where his upper lip is. Like so. And I guess get this mischievous grin working here. We're going to enhance our lights just a touch. And as I've said before, if you are more comfortable working with smaller brushes, you can do that. You're not obligated to use brushes like I do. It's what you're comfortable with. It's really more of a time-saving mechanic there, and maybe also to just loosen you up, relax you a little bit. And just trying to get a little bit of red there, so I'm going to kill the brightness a touch. And now, yeah, you can see that a little more. It was getting burned out. I'm going to throw a little more of that red here. I'm going to hit a little touch on the ear there too. It's when you have a bust like this and it's larger, sometimes I like to try and take advantage of that a little bit and try and get a little more, even more color variation than I might normally do. See here again, using my finger to just mix that around. Trying to think of some reflected light on those. Same thing here. And I'm going to use that same maiden flesh and green. We're going to work on this collar a bit. Like so. And this starts to, it's almost as if you are sculpting it with paint. Yes, it's 3D, and yes, it's Mark put a lot of energy into sculpting it, but we have to, in a way, sculpt it a bit with paint. So you can see what I'm doing here, and just throwing out these lights to remind myself, A, that they need to be there, but also now I know, okay, that's what a light color is going to look like over here. So here, let's get this. Again, if I hit that, boom, it's gone. No fuss, no muss. I'm going to put some other textures in this shirt later. And the buttons, they're not going to be this light, but I'll forget about them if I don't do that. And we will also, see again, if I don't like what I got there, can get rid of that, no problem. So what we're just doing is backpack straps here. And just starting to indicate where I want some kind of a highlight on top of those. So blue liner, is that still out here? There's still some blue liner left. I'm gonna go with my green here. And good. And I'm just going to, this is where I'm going to try and do a little light to dark here. So I'm going to make that a little darker up there, a little darker up there, a little darker up there. And this is my other off-white that you see me use this a lot. There's this maggot white here. It's about the same lightness as Maiden Flesh, but see it's got a little bluish tint to it. And again, a little bit with that verdigris pale green. And you can see how that starts to, it's a little bit of a lighter area down here. And you can see how I'm actually just using the side of that brush. Lets me get more of an application in a broader area more quickly. Might even use a little bit of that here. Can still always use my hand to alter things. Now this is where I'm gonna have more weathering down there, so I'm not really gonna sweat it too much. Here, let's toss in a little more of that white. Looks like, yeah, you can see what I'm doing there. So we're going to do another little level of lighter color on that. So I know this one's not going to have quite the define. Okay, we're working on the metals now, we're working on the face now. Most of my painting videos are not that way because you've heard me say over and over now, I don't want to get bogged down into just one area. And I can go back in here and clean things up later on. Again, this is just setting some tones here. Same thing, I'm just gonna use my finger to do some blending here. Because I think I'd rather let that be more of a kind of a rusted iron look than anything else. Let's have these get a little bit lighter. They are on top after all. Here we go. So where's the other side? Remember it was dark to light. That's the top part's light and then the bottom part is darker. Just by virtue of facing more towards the light. It's also going to create a bit of turn. And I hit it down here so you can see the difference, how much lighter that is. But yet on the palette it looks really dark. Here, let's get a touch of that here. And again, there's going to be a lot of contact with the camera because it is really in. Just not far from that brush at all. We're talking, I think right now I just looked at my knuckle is maybe a half an inch from that camera. And the top of his head is probably a quarter of an inch away from the other camera. I'm going to just impart a little bit of gray onto his leather helmet just to change that color a bit. And let's go a little, I'm gonna water that down a touch. And I'll keep going after these top segments here. To lighten those up. And then we switch around like we've been doing towards the bottom half as we work our way down here, and now we're after that reflected light instead of cast light. I'll hit some over here. And I'm not really messing around with this a whole bunch, since effectively he should be kind of casting a shadow on that. And I'm just going to really let the rust and other type things do its work on that. So again, don't want to get too wrapped up in just one zone. So let's go back over to here, to his backpack. You can see I've got a lot of the same grays already. And now that I've got some of that rust in place, see if I just work over the top here pretty transparently. You can see how transparent that is. You start to get, sort of leaves the rust behind, because rust shouldn't be sitting on the surface. It really is from the inside out, I guess, if you want to call it that. Now, like I said, you can really expound on some of these things more when you're doing this, when you're doing yours. I'm going to lighten up a few areas in here, not too much. If it gets to be too much, I can always just tone that down again. And this is the other advantage of the bigger brush, is now it holds much more pigment. So I can really just keep going and going here without having to necessarily go back to the palette, 2 or 3 brush strokes back to the palette. I can keep going here for a while. And there's a few, I don't know what I want to say, subtle ways that can be helpful to just stay on the miniature instead of having to always bounce back and forth to the palette. You can kind of keep your eyes on the miniature more. Throw a little bit more of my off-white here, the blue off-white, otherwise known as maggot white. So I'm just gonna do a few more lighter elements here, and we'll go back in. Maybe we'll start to focus on a few things, like these jars down here. Is that stuff going to be glowy? His goggles, do we put a glow on that? So in the next segment, maybe it's time to, they're not finishing details, but it's time to maybe think about some of our more dramatic areas, and that would definitely entail things that glow. So as they look for specialty areas there, so I can just push this stuff around. And even here, can maybe put a little bit of a light on that edge. I think these must be some kind of spouts or whatever. We'll do something on those. So again, just as a reminder, this is the Frozen Ninja 3D Kickstarter. This is the Alchemist. And that campaign is still active now. It's going until, I believe that would be Friday, November 16th. And Mark is a really great sculptor. We had a chance to talk a lot at ReaperCon about his process, how he likes to go about doing this sculpting. So we're gonna throw a little bit of this gray onto these jars again. Those are the things we'll maybe touch on next. Start to inject a little more of the dramatic colors in here, because we've really worked within a kind of a set limited palette like this. Get just a touch lighter. I also have to think, okay, I think some of the stuff I'm doing here is going to be free and clear. It won't be hidden by his arms or his shoulders. There's an awful lot of times in the not so distant past where I spent a whole bunch of time on an area that, especially if I was working in multiple pieces, put it together and went, wow, look at that. I could have saved a whole bunch of time because nobody can see that half hour, 40 minutes, whatever, of work that I just spent on that one area. And even when you do the dry fitting thing or whatever, sometimes you just don't see an area where, oh boy, look, they're just never going to see that. And so I just drag the brush across here. That's the kind of nifty thing about using these brushes. Now I'm going to say these are probably glass. Why not? Yeah, I'll just go with those as glass. And I think you can see where all this is going as we lighten this up a little more. When I actually attach this to his back, I'm going to, as long as I can get it on camera, that's maybe where I'll try and toss in some extra little color things, maybe some greens, some purples, probably even too when we're doing all these jars. So I'm going to do a few lights on here to maybe indicate these are glass. And some of those rims you'll never be able to see on camera, so probably hit those off camera. Alright, so we'll pause here, get some new paints out on the palette, and then we'll start to mess with our more detailed areas. So we wanted to get more involved in some details, which means throwing a few different colors out onto the palette. Most of these are going to be the clear paints. So what I'm going to do is throw out some clear green right here. Remember that secret weapon, what is that, the verdigris blue that we had talked about? Throw that out there too. Why not put some clear yellow? And, oh, let's not forget our fluorescent green from Vallejo here. Now, let's start these vials, containers over here. What I'm going to do is take some of that fluorescent green. I'll see how thick that is. Just like it was on the Summoning a Dragon bust. It's really, really thick, but it is super transparent. So that's just something you have to think about as you go to work with it. So you can see that I painted a little bit of light color there too, because again, look at how transparent that is. It almost doesn't even want to cover that. And I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to say that maybe these other ones also have a touch of that green in them too. And you can see I'm just trying to get a hint of it here. Let's hit some of these other ones. Like so. And at this point, it doesn't have to be super precise. And if we're going to say that stuff has a little bit of a glow to it, well, you'll have a tough time seeing this. But I'm going to do a touch of a reflection there. Let's turn this around. You won't really be able to see it completely, but you'll see how that's getting a little bit lighter. So that is at least just a touch of a reflection that I'm trying to do there. I don't necessarily want it to be casting a ton of light. Maybe just a hint of a glow, and that is it. Maybe even a bit on the undersides of these things. That is the neat thing about the fluorescents. They're super transparent, so you can do some subtle things here that don't take very long. I'm going to just say this is some kind of a protective encasement around these jugs here, that maybe these were also the same shape as this round, but that sort of gets the round peg into the square hole or something like that. I may actually throw a little bit of clear yellow in there. That's going to lighten it a bit. It's going to lighten it and then make it slightly less transparent, which may sound kind of funny, talking about a clear paint. At least the name of it being clear, making another paint less transparent. And the reason I'm doing this part now is because then I can just sort of paint the straps of these over the top of it instead of having to worry about painting around it. And all I want to do is just throw a little bit of that out there. Remember, there was another place too. We had thought there was going to be some greenish glow, and that was going to be here. Take some more of that clear yellow. Throw that in there. And let's see if I can just cast a tiny bit of that onto his nose here. Not a lot, just a little. Not go crazy with that, but what I am going to do is, so I just threw a few dots of that in here. People won't even really notice. Just, I want to get a few little touches of it, just to add a few little accents to that metal. Not many, just a few. Just a couple. And I'll go back to these. You have to let that stuff dry also. It's not the quickest drying paint in the world. And if you try to go back over it too quickly, it just pretty much wipe it away. And I don't think that's what you're wanting, so again, you give it a little bit of time. So as before, just trying to brush in a little bit of a light there. One reason I'm doing this is that it makes these, I'm not sure what they are, little kind of wires and piping, that sort of thing. Makes it a little more visible, but without having to actually paint all kinds of colors down in there. So you're sort of getting a bit more detail slash interest, and you're actually spending less time, less work, you get a little more bang for your buck by making that little maneuver there. So I am going to go back to that maggot white here. And now this is really an opaque. It's also much lighter. And I'm going to go back. Let's see if this is, it's a bit drier here. And I'm going to go into here. Or maybe want some brighter things to be on that lens. Like so. Just a few touches there. Maybe on some of these containers. Let's find a few lighter areas. And then what I'll do to finish those off and make them look like more of a glass type surface is to actually hit them with the secret weapon water effect. And I'm going to do the undersides here, and I'm almost going to start tapping at this to give it somewhat the look of bubbles. I can see I've got some of my blue tack here that's kind of in the way. Gonna get some of that off of there. And then what I can do is do a few little glazes of clear green mixed with the fluorescent green, and that's gonna darken it down. And we're gonna do that. Let's do that here. Maybe even a touch of the blue here. Yeah, some more of the fluorescent. That'll make it still bright, but also now it's going to be a little bit darker here. And here. And here. And then if we do want a little bit of a hint of greenish glow on some of that. Now it's a tad darker. I think you can see it best right here. So you have to, in order to show light, you must have dark. So this is the bit where we put in the dark. Just hitting that with some touch of darker green. Again, I have to go much faster than you do. You can take way more time yourself. And then vice versa. We got some light colors again. Picking out a few areas here to make lighter, and then do a touch of those bubbles there, because now it's darker there. So see how the bubbles show up a little bit more right there. Down here. And like I said, you can always use a smaller brush. I'm just sticking with this to make things go a little bit more quickly. And now having the bubbles like that, give it a little bit of action. It would be much more difficult if this was smaller. Not like I said before, it's big enough. We can take advantage of that extra size. Do some of these effects. But I will have to let that really set before I mess around with the water effects. So I think that gives you an idea of what we're doing around here. So now got these containers in here. Now we could put labels on those if we wanted. Maybe if there's time, I'll try and do that. That might be in the very final step. But I'm going to take some blue here, make one of these containers blue. Maybe that one. I don't have too many. There's not that many containers that are exposed. So there's just a couple here. And let's see if I've got any. I do have some light color left here. What I'm going to do is lighten that towards the bottom part there. Same thing on that container. I'm going to grab myself some more of that sort of off-white blue. Mix it with that. And get a little bit lighter down here. And maybe even I'm going to get after some of these other jars too, because what we want to do is have them look somewhat clear. So what I'm going to do is take this same blue. I'm going to have some fun over here on these goggles for one thing, but also here. See that? It just, again, I think I wanted these to be a bit more of a shiny steel type of color. And I'm just trying to have some more things reflected on this. So I got a little bit of the green. Now there's a little touch of that blue there. Might give it a little more shine, shimmer. Make it distinctive from perhaps the iron of the backpack. And we're going to go back to the goggle here. This is essentially similar to what we did to those bottles. How it gets lighter here towards the bottom. lighter towards the top. I'm going to keep going. Let this lightness towards the bottom. Keep on going. And there's one thing you'll note that has not been used yet. We have not come anywhere near touching white. And there's a really sound reason for that. One thing we haven't played with is purple. Let's throw it out there. Let's throw that out there and do a few things with it. First things first, I'm going to take some of that. Do I have any? The clear blue has dried a bit. I'm going to take a touch of purple here. And we're going to not just darken that, but also change the color a bit. So now it's a little more on the purple side. Let's maybe even throw in a bit more. So now we've got the blue and purple kind of bouncing it, contrasting with that green there. And not good. Still have some of my off-white, and I'm going to throw a little bit of purple into the shirt here to a few places. And onto the metals here. It's something that people probably won't even notice when they're looking at it. The eye is just going to register that as gray. I actually have, this is available to the patrons now, it's called, well, Shades of Gray, and you can imagine what that might be. It's an entire video that shows you how to get many different types of gray. And we're even going to throw a little bit of that here. Again, this is such a large skill bust. If we don't get these differences in the colors here, it's going to get a little boring, a little looking the same. There's even some purple in on that side of the goggles there. We'll do the same thing here. So people probably won't just look at that and go, oh, look at that purple there. Part of it, the reason why it's not as noticeable is that it's a little grayed down. No pun intended, I suppose. But it's the same value as far as lights and darks as what's around it. Alright. Still got that purple here. And let's have ourselves a purple container here. Let's make it less full than the blue one. Okay, and I'm going to grab, remember the maiden flesh color there, since that's a little bit more on the pinkish side. Here we go. And get that where you can see it, but where I can still reach it. And then I'm going to refract some of that purple into a few areas of the glass. Lighten it up a touch more. Into there, so now we've got two different colors of jars there, and here on the main event, guess what we're going to do? I'm going to throw in a few little, so you actually have the purple right next to that super bright green. Again, all this is to make it seem that much more shiny. Purple here, gonna try and work some of that into the face. Binoculars here. Like that. See a touch here on the face where some of the green is. So while the first one that we did, the summoning a dragon bust, that had very limited range of colors. We're going a little more all out on this one. And that's what I was hoping to do, was give you basically a little touch of each one. One with the much brighter high chroma stuff. And let's see if I can't get a few purples into here. It's barely even noticeable, but it's definitely there. To even those stitches, I'm going to go with a touch of the purple on them. I'm going to maybe put a little texture here. So I'm trying to reflect a little bit of the skin onto the goggles down there. And while I've got this, what the heck, let's see if we can't mess around with some freehand stuff on this. So I'm just going to start right here with the line. I'm just going to do some subtle lines. And yes, this is that same gigantic brush that now we can do these little freehand lines with. So let's continue it down here. So hopefully this shows that you can use these same brushes in what looks like kind of a wild slapdash fashion, and then start to use those in a more organized way, more subtle way. So I'm just going to start with a line here and go here. All the way up to the top there. And now I'm going to change this around, flip it over, and start to do some lines this way. Hopefully we still got some of this color left. And see, I didn't like how close that was, so I just essentially erased it with my finger. And I didn't have to worry. I didn't spend hours painting what was underneath it. I spent seconds painting what was underneath it if I didn't like it. Like that one, just wipe it away. So the vertical stripes there, that also starts to draw your head up or eye up to the face, which is really where you want your interest to be. And we'll continue here. Some of the stripes. Yeah, won't get too crazy there because we've got his backpack that most likely is going to block a good portion of that. So I'm just going to lighten this bow tie a little more, and then I'm going to shade it darker with some blue. But we've got one more of our containers yet. I'm going to go with some clear red. Why not? Here, let's grab some of this. A little bit of that. Actually, I'm going to take a touch of purple, tone it down. And this container here, we'll make it much more full. Why not? And then we'll can reflect that on some of these nearby containers. Do I have any? My clear yellow? No. Let's make that more of a pink then. So in the next stage after this, we'll do some weathering stuff, do some rust, we'll do some final highlights, and we'll throw our water effects on our jars here. And that should pretty much give you at least a handle on how to approach something like this Alchemist, where you got different colors, different textures, different shapes, right? So we're not doing too bad here. So as promised, I'm going to throw a little weathering on here for you. It's going to be fairly basic. What we're thinking of doing is maybe enhancing some of the rust effects here, and then doing some of that verdigris in here where we've got this kind of a copper type of thing. So let's actually start with that. And remember, we've got our verdigris colors here. So we've got the verdigris pale green. Let's find a spot here to throw that out. I'm going to go here. Let's see if I can loosen up this palette, move this over a bit, get a clean spot for you to look at on the palette cam. And we've also got verdigris dark green. Let's throw that out there. We can use these on other elements too, which is always fun. And we're going to go back to a larger brush here. Let's start out with got a little bit of that brown liner. The idea is you almost glaze this stuff in. So let's start. This is the really good spot right in here. I want to wipe out all of my darks there. Let's see here, maybe around the spout area. I'm going to do some of that. I'm going to do a little bit up here. You can really easily wipe out all of your copper appearance. So that is something you have to be aware of as you're doing this. But let's get that where you can see it now. And at this point, I'm going to do a few vertical strokes like this. Get rid of some of the excess and then remove a little bit here. So see some streaking going on. A little bit like that. Also, I don't know, makes it look more like there's some form of chemicals that are hitting this. Right? While I've got that green, I'm going to hit some other areas here. Like some of this metal here. I'm looking to just tie some things together. And it also makes, instead of just a lot of brown and tan everywhere, it breaks that up. But it also, like I said, it's going to make your verdigris effect a little less jarring. Yeah. See, at this point, now that that's drying, you can't really see that all that much. Let's get a few little green in some of these other spots here. I know most people would say just metal's not green. Well, metal is many ways just reflects the environment around it. So that's a little more interesting, having that subtle bit of green right there. I think anyways. And that's my story, and I'll just stick with that. I'll put a little more over here. Play off of some of the blues that are there. Guess what? We're gonna grab him. Oh, there's got to be some fun places for green in here. Because, of course, brown leather. What else does it need? It needs green. And I'm going to put some here. See, now it gets a little separation with the strap on the goggles. And the bow tie. Remember I was saying green and purple make gray. Well, this is another way of graying down the bow ties. I don't think you were figuring that the verdigris green was going to be used quite in that area. And guess what? I'm going to throw some over this. Because it's also, again, tying things together. It's like a it's like a dry glaze. How's that? How's that for a term? Going in here again, some of that green playing off the purples, all the fun stuff that's in there. Yeah, a little on the shirt here. Want to have himself some green armpits, it looks like. Now, let's not forget the next part of this here. Verdigris pale green. Mixing that in there. It's pretty liquidy. Now, so I just drop that in there and let it do its own thing, because again, it is mostly like a wash. So I'm going to drizzle that down almost like it's icing on a sponge cake or whatever the heck those things are called. And another little drizzle right there. We're going to hit the top of this, but you can see how transparent that is. It's pretty subtle when all is said and done. And just like I did before, I'm going to continue some of that green out onto my metals here. Just to be subtle. We'll get this here. Who knows? Here's a few more set dots of the pale verdigris there. We'll go a little bit more pure on that. And I'm just going to have a few brighter versions of that here. One more here. Again, not a lot of it. Not much, just enough. The other thing it's also going to do is you'll see the difference in color temperature from that verdigris pale green to, that's why I added the clear yellow to some of those greens, so there would be a little bit of contrast there in the temperature of the greens. Yeah, I tried to keep track of where some of these things were going to go. Here we're going to try and do a bit of a reflection there. Subtle, real subtle. Wipe some away where you think it's going to, again, be too much. So that's going to take care of, I would say, your verdigris effect. And we'll just throw a few more, again, subtle greens in some places. And I'm going to grab that same thing. And there's got to be some places on him. Yeah, we'll do a few on our steel there, right? Maybe a few on his bow tie. Just to get a few lights and midtones there. Just a bit on this. And it's got some of the Maiden flesh still handy. So now the bow tie's got some lighter tones. Shirt, buttons. And now, so you can maybe enhance some of the rust effects here. So we'd used the old rust before. I think this is orange. Nope, this is red rust. Yeah, I know you can't read that very easily, but it's there, trust me. And I might enhance it with a little bit of the clear orange in some places. I'll continue here. With a little bit of that orange in there. You can just... There. Now it's up there. Right. And the same thing goes as our verdigris. We water that down. Now we've set this up pretty nicely for, again, almost some washes of rust. Because where does rust go? It's going to go into the crevices, of course. And this could also be corrosion, like we talked about before, since there's just clearly a lot of chemicals and other such things. So that can make, just like we did in our verdigris effect, see a little rust streak there. Can do that here, not over the reflection though, that wouldn't be quite right. And definitely some up here where there would probably be even more chemical interaction with metals. Over here. And I realize I'm really going through this fast. But there's many, many more examples of this on my YouTube channel. There's just regular videos for everybody can see. But on my Patreon page, I get to more specialty type things. And there's also the Army Painter pledge level. That's one of my favorites. That's where I basically take all different types of game systems, from bolt action to Song and Ice and Fire. And that's where I show you how to paint entire units. It's one of my favorite levels because they're my armies. They are things that I'm either currently using or will be using once they're done. So there's some rust where I'm going to just have some of these dribble down like that. Here, let's get a little rust on this too. Like it's been corroded a touch. Some here. Right. And what I'll do is that's drying, I'm going to hit some of that secret weapon water effects, or realistic water, that's what it's actually called. There's one little phrase on here, it says do not shake. We actually put a big sticker on it that says do not shake, because what is our instinct, all of us? To grab a bottle and shake the heck out of it. Don't want to do that with that. So I'm just going to grab any old brush here that does not have a bunch of paint in it. Actually, I'm going to grab a finer brush here. Make sure this goes where we want it. And we're going to go over this lens here. So basically, see, it's going to give it more of a glassy look. There is just no way with painted highlights that you can do exactly that. No way. So I'm going to do it here too. Why not? I didn't do a touch. Let's see. Where's our bottles? Over here. This is where we really wanted to do it. I'm going to do it over this. And you'll find that it actually enhances some of the colors in the jars. You could even, in theory, tint this color a little bit, or tint the water effects a little bit, and in various layers. So if you really wanted to be snazzy, you could put a touch of blue in this, or whatever. So you can see, it just looks, depending on where, these are my photo lights that are hitting it. Depending on where those are, it's so hard to simulate that. Why not use something that really makes it seem like glass? It just seems too easy to ignore. Thing is, though, texture-wise, I don't want to get it on those straps. It doesn't really belong there. So let's continue on with these different bottles. Now what that should do is create some additional shading on its own. And that's why I put very basic, generic lights and darks on this, because I knew I was going to be getting some more once the water effects went on there. Kind of learned the hard way. I painted in a whole bunch of lights and darks and highlights and such, and then I put the water effects over the top, and they essentially fought with each other, and that wasn't so good. So even here, see, I can put a little more. Yeah, look at that. I don't know if you can see it, but even just putting the water effects on these jar lids here, getting rid of that. Now there's a texture difference between the corks and the bottles, but here I didn't have to try and paint it a bunch of colors where it's all going to be dark anyway. So your eye is just almost believing that those are glass. And now we've got a big texture difference between that and our metals that are over here. And we'll keep going, putting this all the way around each surface. Sometimes you're better off with 2 thin coats as opposed to 1 thick coat. Here, as I've said before, we have to kind of enhance things. I'm going to put a little bit of that here. Yeah, I could even have some water drips here if I did. If I use some of my Liquitex heavy gel, I could have some drops coming out of this. Maybe suspend those on some dental floss. Is a little thick, but fishing line is something that people will use as basically a little bit of a lattice for drops. Alright, so we've got that there. Let's check on our stuff here. So, one thing I did put out on the palette, let's see if it's still good enough. I've just got some, there's enough there. I put some white out on the palette, believe it or not. And like I say, I always leave that off till last, and what we're going to do is find some bright highlights here to really show that this is the shiniest metal. Because if that white is out there, you're just going to be so tempted to use it. And this way it was out of sight, out of mind. There was no temptation to use what wasn't there. And since I don't have to worry about touching things or messing things up with the water effects, that's why I kind of did it on my other piece there, so that I could let that dry on its own. And you can see I'm focusing on these top edges, but not necessarily making that an unbroken line. And that gives it just that extra oomph that it needs. Do a few here. So I can do that on the goggles too. Maybe a few of the stitches. I wouldn't say too many. Not really going to put too much of that on the face for sure. Some on the shirt though. Make it look a little more white. And on his shoulders here. Like so. And a few here. Let's go with the underside of his goggles too. Yeah, oh, and I see there's another place where we wanted some rust. So let's do that. After we slap on a few of these bright highlights. So we need to get a few more over here. Over on this side. Like so. Here we are. And a few more of these subtle, bright highlights there. Here and here. Couple more here, but this is starting to get more into the shadow zone, so we're not going to mess with that too much. And hopefully all those subtle purples and blues and everything else that we put on this earlier, now those recede backward a little bit. Maybe enhance a few of the little stripes on his vest. Give it a little extra dimension. So let's slap our rust here. We still got that rust sitting there on the palette, so no big deal. Let's get that. Start to incorporate that on our base, on our plinth here. Don't want to forget that. So again, we make it somewhat liquidy. We're going to get this where you can see it. And then over the top. And here I'm going to be a little rougher with it. Because I want a broader application. But you can see I treat it a lot like those glazes early on. It's almost like an inverted glaze. There. Let's get a little more. Gonna really focus on where those bolts are attached to the base. That's always a good area for things like rust. Get some streaks here. Might even mix a little bit of the orange into that. To make it a little bit brighter. See, I can wipe some of it away just like I did earlier. And we can do a few streaks here. Now, Secret Weapon does make a bunch of. Here, let's get some of his even brighter ones here. This is more of even a yellow-orange here. Let's get some out. And what this is designed to do, I think, there we go. I'm going to get a little of my other orange in there. They like to interact with each other like this. See, it's wet into wet. And I just dropped it in there. I just dropped it in there, let it do its thing. Same thing there. Right? Do the same thing here. Same thing there. It can be tough. You have to resist the urge to get back in there and manipulate it. You just have to let it go. See, I can do another little streak right there. But that is sort of the key, is to just do it and leave it. Because if you keep diving back in, that's where you're just going to run into those issues. It's not going to look very natural. So we got that. I'm going to go back up to this, because now I've got some of these brighter rust things going on, and find a few places to throw those to. Over here. Like that. And let's say we want to get a little bit of smoke on that chimney. Well, that's where the brown liner's pretty handy. I'm going to take that. You could also use, say, a weathering powder, too. I'm just going to take that. Alright, where are we at here? So once again, I'm going to hit this. And we're going to start to blend that edge along here, just to make it look like it's got some soot. But if you want to do the thing with the weathering powders, that's one more layer of texture that you'll add, which is always good. Never hurts to have more texture. Definitely not. You can see how we've got our, look at how shiny those bottles are now by adding the water effect. So what we're going to do is we'll glue this puppy together so that you can get a little better idea what it looks like overall, and give you some final thoughts. So here we have finished result for now. I'm going to go in and do some more subtle things, because now that it's actually attached to them, I can see other things that I might want to do to it. Things that show up more than I originally thought. So you can see here our difference in glass textures. Spin this around slowly because I just did glue it. See some of our subtles in the subtle textures in the blues and other such things. So I'll show you here the campaign, I believe. That's what's going to come up here. So here you go, and oh, look at that. There's the first video that I did. So if you want to go check that out, that's on my YouTube page right there. That is the Summoning a Dragon bust. That is gigantic. I think her head is almost bigger than this entire bust was. So let's see if we can find him here. So there she is again. And we've got some other nifty figures. I think the cowboy was just unlocked. So we've got that bust, and and here we go. Here's your Alchemist bust that is now unlocked. And it's an add-on, as you can see, for $30. And that is what you are looking at right here. So I hope you enjoyed this video. So if you want to subscribe, you can. There's dozens and dozens more tutorials right here on YouTube. And also, again, if you want to sign up to the Patreon page, that's just James Wappel on Patreon. There is a whole bunch more content available there too. A lot of specialized stuff. So thanks again for watching.